Yo, it's Ed Gallo and Jack Hurley from the Fight Site. We're going to talk about Wrestling Underground 1. And I'm going to try not to call it WUG because that's just a tough acronym to pronounce. But it happened. It was certainly interesting. If you hadn't seen it, basically the idea is that Chael Sonnen does his Submission Underground promotion. It's grappling under Eddie Bravo Invitational rules in a cage, in a small cage. So some fun there, but they use the cage fully, so it's like grappling in an MMA context. This was freestyle and Greco-Roman matches, and we'll get into it. The cage wasn't really supposed to be a factor in the rule set, but it ended up making a pretty big difference, I would say. So we'll get into the details of that per match in general. But yeah, I mean, it was a weird event. It was odd. On paper, the matchups were good. There's a cross weight matchup, so bigger guys wrestling smaller guys, which is cool because it provides you with matchups you wouldn't normally see in the domestic scene. Uh, yeah, it was world caliber guys. It was NCAA champions and All Americans, and it looked good. It looked good on paper. And basically, as soon as the first match started, you could kind of tell it was going to be weird. First of all, the size of the cage. It was small. There was not a lot of mat space, and people were running out of room pretty quickly. And it was not as much space as you would have on a wrestling mat. Plus, you have to consider there's continuation on a wrestling mat. So if you shoot someone out of bounds, things can keep happening out of bounds, like as long as it's part of that sequence a little bit. With the cage, I mean, you can't even get to where out of bounds would be. There's a physical barrier. Whereas Chael Sonnen would say an apparatus, which is not the correct use of that word. So before we talk about the matches, we're just going to talk about the production a little bit and just what it was like. Because with the wrestling community, if you're not from the wrestling community and you're listening to this, which would be interesting, because the topic we're going to discuss briefly is what is the point of potential crossover events. I feel that this was set up. It was on UFC Fight Pass. It was right after a grappling event. It was pretty clear the purpose of this event was to draw in new fans, MMA fans, grappling fans, casual viewers, essentially. Jack, in general, what do you think about the concept of wrestling trying to appeal to new people rather than the existing fan base?
I don't hate it. And I think we should probably talk about this maybe on a future episode
Yeah.
of Wrestling for MMA. But it seems a bit weird that the UFC and Fight Pass and whatever haven't really made much effort to do any kind of regular wrestling stuff, and then they jump all the way in with this gimmicky thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't hate it. I didn't take it that seriously. I don't put that much stock in the results of these matches
Right.
for like future wrestling stuff. So I guess weird, but nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm. The whole idea for me is the wrestling community is always talking about growing the sport. How can we grow the sport? Uh, I think with something as niche as wrestling, you can say, oh, combat sports, they get popular all the time. But does wrestling, like grappling has the hobbyist component where there's the business of grappling with jiu-jitsu. It's the studios. I mean, the Gracies, that was their mission with the UFC, and they succeeded. With wrestling, it's like you don't really, there's no casual competitors really. I mean, if you're in it, you're in it. And once you're done, unless you move on to another sport, which is pretty much what happened. So I could see them trying to draw back in people who used to be involved in wrestling or had some contact with wrestling, and it's passed them by. But that's, I don't know. It doesn't seem like the most efficient thing. And if you're a wrestling fan watching this event, you're watching it because you are starved for content, so you're gonna watch it. But you're not gonna make any new fans, I would say, just because it didn't really represent wrestling all that accurately, aside from one match, which we'll definitely touch on in greater detail. So that there's a weirdness with what the purpose of this was and how effective it was in that regard. And I think the biggest indicator of the weirdness of that event, like that really represents the split interest, is Chael Sonnen's performance as the MC and commentator. I haven't listened to his podcast, but I've heard him plenty over the years, and I think it's become clear that over time in the recent years, Chael has become more and more erratic with his speech, rambling all over the place, just, living the bit a little more than usual. And he was a one-man show for Wrestling Underground. It was entertaining at times. It was annoying most of the time, I would say. And Chael it's interesting because he was an All-American in college, and he was on the Greco scene for a long time. He was high up on the ladder. He made national teams. But like his understanding of wrestling, explaining it, not great for an actual wrestling fan. And then his efforts to like explain simple things for someone that didn't know anything about wrestling, he chose weird details to explain. Like he would be like, oh, let me explain what an underhook position is, but then like all the greater concepts of scoring and dynamics of a match and other stuff that would be important to know, he didn't touch on. That was during the matches, and then between the matches, he did not talk about the match that just happened or the match that was coming up. He mostly read texts from his phone and like tried to tell stories about people in the wrestling community, and it was mostly like insider conversation, insider humor. But even for insiders, it wasn't. I don't know. Did you feel spoken to by any by any of Chael's rambling?
No. It seemed like he couldn't figure out what audience he should be aiming his commentary at, and he couldn't figure out what exactly his purpose was. If he should be explaining it, if he should be like selling you, like explaining why it's cool, right. If he should be like giving play-by-play, and he tried to do all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd be trying to explain what is an underhook. Oh, it's when you kind of like reach inside their arm and grab them. So like their arm is right here, and you want to move your arm right there. So you go to the inside and under of it, and like things like that. But then he'd say, oh, and that's a great shot. Oh, and they run into the apparatus. And then he would randomly start talking about Pyle, which is his name for Christian Piles, who's a wrestling media figure. He was just completely all over the place and trying to do way, way, way too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, who could accomplish that, really? So you can't even blame Chael for not doing well at that. But he shouldn't have been trying to do that. And I don't know what their funding is like. Maybe they couldn't afford to have another man in the broadcast with him, but I think he could have just focused. And also, I don't think a lot of preparation went into it from his perspective. He wasn't even prepared to speak about what difference the cage would make. And it's like, you've wrestled in the cage many times. Like, it's all the same dynamics minus the striking. It's like cage wrestling is an established art form, even divorced from submissions and strikes. I mean, there's things that happen. And he said, "Oh, it's an experiment. It's never been done before. We're all learning together." I'm like, that's not necessarily true. So I don't want to bag on Chael the whole time, but if you can catch a replay, it was almost funny how ridiculous he was, but it was mostly not funny.
It was just so incessant. It wasn't funny.
Yeah, it was just nonstop. He never.
It's stopped. Like it's funny if you hear a joke once, and it's not funny if you hear it 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
It was because he just kept doing. It's like, okay, Chael, this isn't even funny anymore. Stop.
He was chailing around, but the matches were pretty good, I would say. I would definitely, like I said in the beginning, a little under my expectations because I guess I didn't realize how small the space was. But yeah, like right off the bat, it became really apparent what the dynamics were going to be of the space and the cage, as well as the size differentials. So with a larger space, a smaller wrestler has more room to maneuver, and they can set up different attacks. And if they get pushed back, there's a little more wiggle room to deal with that. In the smaller cage, I mean, it's you got to force stuff a little more. You got to stand your ground a little more. You got to be more physical, and that's always going to play to the bigger person. So we'll just go in order that they happened. So Joey McKenna versus Tyler Berger was the first matchup. Jack got this one right. I got this one wrong. And Berger wrestled 157 in college. McKenna wrestled 141. even if theoretically they're both like wrestling 65 kilograms soon, which seems unlikely, but maybe that's
I
what
think
Berger's
Berger's
doing.
74.
74, yeah, but they looked like different size wrestlers, which they were. And you could tell McKenna was feeling the pressure. And when he was defending shots, his like foot was getting caught against the cage, and he was like trying to sprawl fully and get his hips back and counter with chest straps, which is totally valid in freestyle. But it was really, really difficult for him to get that kind of counter game going because you need space to chest strap someone, and he couldn't even bear his weight back because his feet were hitting the cage, and then when he's getting pushed back, his legs were hitting the cage, and he couldn't actually get a base under him to do it. And it just kept happening where he would go to do something that might work on a mat and then getting run into the cage and couldn't really get much going. But did you have any other like stylistic observations about this one? Or was it more of the
I
size
mean,
and cage?
there's a reason it was always McKenna who was the one struggling with the cage. I mean, it was Berger getting to the legs more, and it was
Right.
Berger able to push forward more. And I think that was kind of the size and length disparity that we talked about. And Berger, I think scrambles better than people give him credit for. There was one sequence where McKenna was like 90% of the way to a takedown, and Berger just kind of kept wrestling and got out of it. But it does seem like kind of the story of that match was they kept running into the fence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the future, for future bookings, they should consider a little bit more the styles of the wrestlers and like what would look really good from a freestyle perspective. Because with the Greco match, I mean, they did throws, which is the way to make Greco exciting. With freestyle, you want to have cool takedowns, sure, but also I think scrambles. I think high level freestyle scrambling is one of the coolest things to look at because there's so much that goes into it. And you have to avoid exposing, and so many points can go on the board really fast, and it's one of the best parts of freestyle. But with a smaller area and a bigger and a cage in the way, those things get stifled pretty quickly. So I think you have to have guys that are more willing to have those like center mat exchanges and fire off attacks and are faster. So I think more smaller wrestlers might be a better move, like more 57 kilogram guys, 61s, and guys who specifically take a lot of leg taps and are more active. I think that might be good if you're trying to showcase the sport in this setting. I think you have to pick guys that are going to be better for that. I'm not sure how much thought went into the selection of athletes and the matchmaking. Like for example, we're not talking about it yet, but during the Shakur Rashid, Sammy Brooks match, Chael was like, the appeal of this match is that it's Iowa versus Penn State. And like, that's, yes, they're both still very good teams in 2020, and they're two of the best teams in the NCAA, but like, it doesn't really add to the goodness of the match. And I think he mentioned that it was a selling point for Dana White, who apparently had to okay this. He said, it's Iowa versus Penn State. And Dana was like, sign me up. Because I guess those are the wrestlers he knows. But yeah, I don't know how they thought about this, but I saw Jackie was suggesting some matches on Twitter and as a response, which is good. But yeah, Berger won, and he called out Anthony Ashnault, which I think would be cool. And I think Ashnault would beat him. So if they want to do that again, great. But yeah, was the Greco match second?
Yeah, I think Greco's next.
Okay, so Ben Provisor. Oh yeah, and after this match, I declared that all of the bigger wrestlers would win, and I think that was true. All the big wrestlers won.
It depends on how you view Moore versus
McFadden's
McFadden's bigger, yeah.
and
It
Moore
depends on
is.
how big you think Deron Wint is.
Oh, heavy is different than bigger, in my opinion. He might weigh more than Colin Moore, but he's not bigger.
All right, then yes, I think the bigger guy won.
All the bigger guys won, so that was probably the way to pick these matches. But I think if we knew more about the space, we probably would have went that way. But I mean, Jack did go that way. I would have been more careful about that. But yeah, the Greco match. Okay, so elephant in the room, was the first throw a shoot? Was it a work? Basically, I don't remember the position, but I think it was some sort of over under, and Perkins stepped around and threw him, and Provisor like jumped over his head. Like he went like fully airborne in like a kind of like a lateral throw, but he like really went and hit over heels, and it was very exaggerated. And people like Austin, our friend Austin Early, who have a lot of experience at Greco and watch a lot of Greco, say sometimes when you hit a throw perfectly, it doesn't look real. Like it looks effortless and ridiculous. But I mean, it was pretty early on and it looked crazy. So a lot of people were speculating whether it was real or not. Um, do you have a take on that? Do you think it was
Yeah,
possibly fake?
I don't think it was worked in the sense that it was, coordinated. I think it was, you know how like in the NBA All-Star game, they
No,
don't.
I don't know
Okay, so
that.
basically in sports All-Star games, a lot of times they try really hard to do cool stuff on offense, and they
Mm-hmm.
do not try really hard on defense. Like they're not letting them score; they're just
Right.
not giving full effort. But then when they do have the ball, and they're like, all right, now I got to do something cool, and then they go hard. And it seemed like they were kind of doing that, where it
Yeah.
was, you know what, like we're kind of here to have fun. I'm gonna do something cool. They're giving max effort offensively and 70% effort defensively, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what that looks like. It
Yeah.
is a little suspicious how quickly on the very first throw Provisor accelerated off the mat. Like the speed that his feet are moving at for the first like half of the throw seems very unusual. But who cares?
Yeah. It's not a big deal either way.
I think it's Perkins gets to the throw and he Provisor's like, oh, he's hitting it. All right, and just goes with it instead of trying to
Mm-hmm.
fight down.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's possible they had like a gentleman's agreement beforehand. Like, hey, if I'm hitting something, let's make it big, like a couple times, just to sell the sport. Because I mean, Greco's been under a lot of pressure lately with the flow event and Downey and everybody, and like, there's always been talk against Greco, but I mean, it was really in the spotlight lately. So I think as the only Greco match in the card, they made an extra effort to show out. And I mean, we talked about how boring this was going to be beforehand, and it was definitely the most high scoring, exciting match of the night. I mean, they're both throwing each other a ton, lots of points in the first period, and then Provisor slowed it down and just kind of hung on to his lead and pushed Perkins around, which is more like what we thought was going to happen. But yeah, they really let it
Mm-hmm.
fly to start with. So it was cool. It was great. And Provisor won, and he did an interview with USA Wrestling recently, and I don't know. Seemed genuine. So I don't think it was worked or anything, but like maybe there was some shoot elements in the very beginning because that's I could see two like real competitors saying like let's make some stuff happen early on, and then we'll get serious, and that way we'll like have similar amounts of points. And with the size discrepancy, maybe it's fair that Perkins gets the bigger throw. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. I don't think it's a problem if they did have any sort of arrangement. This isn't a there aren't any real stakes to this event. Um, and yeah, you gotta show out. So I thought it was fine either way. It was a great match, and definitely exceeded our expectations.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, Rashid and Brooks was next, right?
Sounds right.
Yeah. Oh, you know what?
It
Was
was. It
Rashid
was.
bigger than Brooks?
Probably he wrestled
All right, so
most
all the big
recently
guys
at
didn't
a
win.
higher weight, but yeah,
Let's say one time the
I,
bigger guy
I,
didn't
I
win.
think I think they'll be at the same weight though.
The B
Rashid,
86.
yeah, they'll be 80 because it was 190 for this thing, and Rashid seemed
Mm-hmm.
fine,
Yeah.
so he'll be an 86, I think.
So Rashid looked pretty good in the
Hmm.
first period, right?
Yeah, he looked like he actually knows how to do moves again. I mean, he just barely did anything the last year or so. It seemed like with Penn State, where against anyone good, he was not going to score a lot, and he got 3 takedowns, 2 in the first like couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of what we talked about um, the Brooks versus Aaron Brooks match,
Mm-hmm.
where Sammy Brooks sort of has issues with being a bit slower, being a bit more plodding. Guys get to his legs a little quicker, but he kind of uh, with his pace and his pressure eventually ends up catching up and then pulling away from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Brooks definitely kept pressuring him from his ties and keeping a higher work rate. Even if he wasn't taking a lot of attacks, he was making him work, pushing him around. And
Mm-hmm.
Rashid got tired, which is pretty normal for him and his style. And he went pretty hard in the beginning, so I think there might have been a little bit of a dump there. He didn't gas out completely. He faded a bit, not allowed Brooks to move him around. But the best thing that happened in this match is you've watched it more recently than I have, so correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he had him in front headlock, and he used the front headlock to push him back to the cage, and Rashid was standing up tall, and then he transitioned from the front headlock to the double against the cage, and he finished that. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome, and that's exactly the kind of thing that you can do. And MMA in the cage is there for you. You can release, a hold, and they're still there, and if they don't widen their base, it's a really easy shot. And did he lift off, or did he pull him back?
He pulled him back.
Yeah, that's cool too, because that's another cage tactic. I mean, I think anyone instinctively as a wrestler, like there's a barrier driving forward, to bundle him and lift him, but he knew that he can pull him straight back and put his butt in the mat. So that was great. We should also mention that in the Provisor Perkins match, Provisor, first of all, seemed like not how the rules were written, but Provisor pushed him to the cage with an underhook and kept him there for a little bit and adjusted his grip, and I think got a body lock and threw him off of that.
Mm-hmm.
The rules that we saw that Gadsden posted said that if you're not like continuing an attack against the cage, they're supposed to break it. And I saw some really quick breaks.
I thought that seemed like pretty legitimate, but then it also seemed like as the event went on, they started getting a little bit stricter with that.
Mm-hmm. Compared to the other calls, it seemed like it went way further without like an attack going on.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, it was cool, and it was cool that Provisor knew to do that. And all the instances where people seemed to like actually want to use the cage and used it was awesome. The McKenna Burger match is one where he's like they were just wrestling, and then McKenna was running out of room, and then that was it. That was the only one where there was like no use of the cage really proactively. But yeah, that was really cool that Sammy Brooks did that, and he won the match and looked good doing it. So I enjoyed that one, and I believe we had McFadden versus Tommy Gantt next.
I think Winmore.
Oh yeah, there were so many matches in this.
It was supposed to be Mark Hall in the co-main slot.
Right. So Colin Moore, a 197 in college, and I believe a 97 kilogram guy in freestyle, versus Jerome Lynn, who's been at 86 and 97. He's an MMA fighter now. He didn't do nothing. He tried a little bit, Jerome Lynn did, but I mean, Moore was hand fighting so heavy and just keeping him tied up and put a lot of pressure on him. And I feel like Wynn couldn't really make any dynamic movements happen. He couldn't really set up the shots. And then when he did try to get to Moore's legs, I felt like he just ran into a wall, and just his timing and like the explosion on his shots, it didn't really look like there was a way for him to win that match.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of what we talked about, that he's just too far away to really move the person. So 97 kilograms is 213 pounds. That's what this match was contested at.
Mm-hmm.
When last wrestled at 202, fought, I think, at 185.
Yeah.
And was short at that weight. And Moore did some pretty cool stuff with the misdirection, where he would take like a duck under, but then shoot to the far leg. And that was pretty good, but it seemed like Wynn just kind of had nothing for him.
Mm-hmm. There was that one time, I think, where he had him pressing him really hard from like collar ties or something like that, and then Moore cut off the engagement, and then hit a really cool low double, which was fun. But yeah, Moore looked good. It wasn't like the best opponent to measure him against, but I mean, he was steady. He looked good. Wynn didn't look incompetent or anything. That's not a good match to win if you're completely out of it and the guy's big and tall and you're not trying that hard. Yeah, I enjoyed it. That was a good performance. It was probably one of the most one-sided matches, second most one-sided match of the night, I would say. Yeah, so was supposed to be Mark Hall and Tom and Gantt. We were pretty excited for that one. And then a few days out, Mark Hall is injured, I believe, and has to pull out. And another Penn RTC guy, David McFadden, steps in. And McFadden was a 165 the whole time in college. Is that right? Pounds?
Yeah, he was. He did a year at 174, but he was mostly a 165.
Yeah, and Gantt was a 157 guy. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So McFadden might have been a little bigger, but I don't think it was.
Yeah, they'll probably both be at 74 for the Olympic year.
Basically even on this one, but McFadden looked really good. I think this is probably like, I don't know, OW performance of the night, considering they were similar in size. They're both competing actively. and it was like a competitive match, and McFadden looked amazing. So what was your read on this one?
McFadden looked pretty good. I mean, he did kind of what he does best, which is just shoot a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It I was surprised how little Gantt was able to do when he
Yeah.
did stop the shots. When Gantt would completely sprawl out on him and couldn't hit a go behind or a re-attack or anything. And then when Gantt got to his own shots, couldn't really finish. And so I guess I was just impressed with McFadden because that's the type of match he's lost before. Um, and it's also he's coming off, I assume, some kind of injury because he looked really bad
Mm-hmm.
in like February and March of this year. So it looks like he's back and he's going to be good for his freestyle career.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, being at the Penn RTC with Mark Holland, Jordan Burroughs around him, and Dan Valamont, unless he left. But yeah, I mean, that's a really good situation. So definitely keeping a closer eye on McFadden as we go. I mean, he ended his college career pretty badly, like you said, losing to like my guy Jake Wenzel at ACCs after beating him pretty handily before that. So yeah, maybe he was dealing with something, and now he's back and healthy and looking strong. Yeah, that was really cool. So I was surprised, but happy about it because like I said, Penn RTC, I'm always going to support that, my Philly guys. And then he shouted out Philly and Jersey, and he said, "I'm going down the shore." So I don't know what that meant, which shore, but usually it's the Jersey Shore if you're saying that and you're in Philly. Anyway, the main event, pretty much what we thought was going to happen is Gwiz was going to take a lot of shots, and Gadsden wasn't going to be able to do much about it because he's not like a super dynamic defender, and Gwiz is big and good at finishing singles. And yeah, he looked cool. I thought his shoe game and his compression top and shorts, the whole getup was great. It was just a really tough matchup for him, like we said, and it went pretty much exactly as we predicted.
Yeah, if anything, it was more one-sided than I thought.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to just be over so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Gwizdowski looked good, and Gatson looked like he just wasn't able to deal with someone who's good and also bigger than him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the fact that we didn't have a ton to say about all those matchups kind of tells you what the night was like. It went really quickly. The card went super fast, and not all of the matches were competitive, and the ones that were competitive were still kind of weird. And Chael's commentary really made it hard to focus on the quality of the matches, and he couldn't pronounce Gwizdowski's name. He was calling him Gizwowski, which is
Or
also
Kyle
distracting.
Snyder's.
What was that?
He also couldn't pronounce Kyle Snyder's name.
Schneider. Yeah.
Yeah, that was and he said it about 20 times when there was
Yeah.
no need to.
Yeah. And he's talking about booking Bo Nickel versus Austin DeSanto. It's a 97 kilogram guy versus like a 61, a 57, whatever you want to call it. It's a lot of weirdness going on. But if you're a glutton for punishment, I would suggest going to Fight Pass and rewatching the card because there's good wrestling, and then maybe have the sound off if you just want to watch the wrestling. But I think they're doing another one of these, not until December because I mean, senior nationals are in October, and Beat the Streets is in September at some point later this month, and there's wrestling going on in between. So I think he needs people out of their competition cycle just to agree to it. So yeah, I mean, overall takeaways from the card. Anything you didn't get to say about it?
I think part of why there wasn't that much action against the fence, people didn't really know what they were getting into.
Right.
And I think now that we've seen it, and if they have more of these, people are going to prepare more for the fence. And they're going to work to put people against the fence and do finishes they've prepared, and it's going to get uglier in terms of not having enough space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be interested to see if there's more MMA fighters involved, like wrestlers turned MMA fighters, and maybe even I don't know if I'd rather see an MMA fighter wrestler against a wrestler or two MMA wrestlers against each other in this setting. I'm not sure what I want out of this event moving forward. I'd like a bigger cage. But I think that's probably a lot to ask for, and he probably just has the one cage. He doesn't want to have to get another one. That's my guess. And plus, they already have the size for the submission cards, and I think they've been going pretty well apparently. So maybe not there. But yeah, I don't know. Next time there's an event, we'll talk about it. And next time you hear from us in terms of an event, I think it'll probably be for Beat the Streets in like 3 weeks from now. We don't know the lineup for that card. I think Yanni Diakomahalis is going to be on it. He quote tweeted the event with like some sort of emoji. So maybe he's going to be on it. I don't know against who. Probably a foreign opponent if they can get that going, because they like
it's been weird that they put out the press release today for an event that's supposed to happen in 17 days.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the deal is. Apparently, they were targeting Jordan Oliver versus Ilyas Bekbulatov from Russia, but I don't know what the deal is with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we're going to know anything. I think they don't know what the story is going to be with the college wrestlers. They don't know if they can have any youth matches, and they're still just trying to throw something together.
Mm-hmm. On the bright side, Beat the Streets usually has women's matches, which is, no strings attached really. Even though, I think they do get paid a little bit for these, but typically, unless you're Jordan Burroughs, you don't like ask for more and like negotiate your price. So it's just another chance for women's wrestlers to get representation, and we'll talk about the matches once they are booked. And yep, we'll see what happens. But yeah, Wrestling Underground, WUG, little bit of a mess, but decent to have competition again. And Jack has an article that will be out at this point. No, right after this, it'll be out about Mark Hall, right?
Yeah, it was meant to be a preview of this event. When he pulled out, I sort of reworked it to just make it about sort of his career and what I like about him and what we might see from him going forward.
Mm-hmm. I am excited to read that because I'm a guy who doesn't totally understand Mark Hall entirely. I would say that I've always seen him as a guy who's like, yeah, he has all his good competency areas, like really, really strong in most positions, but then he doesn't like do a thing to people. Like his matches don't look any particular way. And sometimes he just like, I'm going to do this move now. And he just does the move and it works a lot of the time. That's always been my read on him. So I never really liked him. Because I'm like, what does he even,
he reminds me a lot actually of Chamizo.
That's fair.
But I guess read it and you'll hopefully find out a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So everyone read that once it's out. And yeah, we'll get back to you later. But goodbye for now.